Welcome to Beyond the Syllabus, where we talk with superintendents, curriculum leaders, and education innovators who are rethinking what school can be and how it can better serve the academic and personal needs of every learner. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Syllabus. Super excited for our conversation today. Here with me is Dr. Daniel Smith, who brings over 21 years of transformative leadership in Virginia education. He's previously served as a chief of staff, acting superintendent, principal, and teacher before beginning his tenure as superintendent at Stafford County Public Schools back in 2024. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So listen, I like to start all these conversations with just first understanding what got you into this world of education. What brought you here?
I will say, I was unsure what I wanted to do going to college. I was unsure what field I wanted to go into, and kind of fell into education as something as I started to work with kids in different capacities as a coach, and then as a teacher, and really just fell in love with it. And then, had opportunities throughout the way to serve as a teacher and at an elementary school, but then also at the high school levels. And then, now I've had the pleasure of serving as superintendent in Stafford County. So, just something that I fell into. My dad was a teacher. My mom was actually a middle school bookkeeper. I'm the oldest of four. I'm the only one still in education, but still holding it strong.
There you go. Well, someone's got to hold down the family legacy here, right? It's funny, a lot of educators, I hear it often that they didn't necessarily know they wanted to go in education, but they always had some background in it, whether it was their parents or they were just around it their whole lives. So it's always interesting to hear about. And you said you were a coach too. What sports did you coach?
I was a wrestling coach. Well, I was a
Oh,
wrestling coach for several places, and then I also coached basketball when I was a teacher up in Alaska.
very cool. Very cool. I mean, as a sports guy myself, played sports my whole life, coaches and teachers, hands down, biggest impact on my life. And a lot of the best teachers were coaches, just kind of the ability to build a classroom culture, the ability to lead, the ability to mentor. Do you feel like your coaching experience has kind of led to your leadership skills and styles today?
Absolutely. I think that it's a lot of in my approach to leadership is around coaching and how do we all get a little bit better each and every day. I take that approach here in Stafford. We have, 5,500 employees, and we talk a lot about can we each get a little bit better every day? And if we can take that small step forward, how that helps us to make leaps and gains as a school system. And so we talk with our coaching teams about coaching our teachers up, our teachers about coaching our students up. And it is really about us getting a little bit better each and every day and learning from those mistakes as a part of the learning process, so we can learn and grow.
100%. I mean, in the field of entrepreneurship, too, as a founder, I have days where I hit grand slams and I have days where I hit a little blooper into left field and it's just a little single. But if each and every day, if I can move an inch forward, 1 yard down the field, we're making progress towards our mission. And it doesn't always feel as grand as other days, but it's just all about continuous progress, right? What's the saying? It's like you get 1% better each day, that compounds and you get really, really good after a while. What's one funny, crazy story from your wrestling coach days that you can share?
In terms of funny, I've been fortunate to be a part of wrestling for a long time. My dad and brother are wrestlers. My son is now wrestling in college, and so it's kind of been in the family a little bit. And so I think for me, it's about helping to instill those skills around perseverance and grit and determination, and those are the skills that I think I took away, and I hope that others and the wrestlers that I coached and even my kids take away from that in terms of if you want something bad enough, you can work to achieve it if you practice and work hard and stay focused on those goals, and that you really can achieve anything you put your mind to.
100%. I preach a lot about the psychological concepts of having an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. Internal being you fundamentally believe that you can control the outcome of something, external being that you don't believe that. Things just happen to you or life just comes at you. And I'm a person, I've always had a really strong internal locus of control and believe that if I say I'm going to do something, I'll actually do it and I'll actually make it happen. And I think sports is I can attribute almost all of that to being in sports my whole life for sure. So talking about leadership too, right? Being a coach and how those leadership styles, you say, you coach your directors, they coach principals, principals coach teachers, teachers coach students. What are some maybe specific leadership techniques or routines that you have that you've really started to kind of blossom into as a superintendent?
I think it really starts with relationships. I think you've got to build time to build those relationships, get to know your people. and let them get to know you, really build that trust. Because I think a lot of times, especially when we talk about coaching, that starts with that relationship and them, having that. It's not really about that positional power, it's that relational power, that knowing that you care for them, that you want them to get better, you want them to be their very best, and that you're in it with them, standing right by side, walking side by side with them. And so I do believe it starts with those relationships. And I think part of it is, as superintendent, is how do you set up those structures and those supports to have those important relationships. Usually you'll have kind of your close knit team, your senior leaders in terms of cabinet, but then how do you extend beyond there? So one of some of the things that I've done here is really try to be intentional about thinking about advisory committees. So I have a community advisory group, about 45 community faith-based leaders that comes together usually about once a month, and we talk about key topics and how we can come together. Similarly, I have a parent advisory that comes together that we operate in a similar fashion. I have a staff advisory, and I've got a student advisory. I think those are really important. And topics vary. Topics are different based on what they feel like is really important, what they'd like to give feedback on, and how we can get better. Our students actually, we even take a different approach in that they identify as students what are the top 5 or 6 areas. We do some work at the beginning of the year that you really want to work on, and then they get into small groups to work on those areas to provide recommendations on how we can improve. And so we'll have a number of recommendations coming out at the end of the year based on the student experience and the student voice. So those are a couple of structures around advisory. I think also setting up structures that allow you to make sure that we are staying in touch with folks, that we are building those relationships and staying close to the work. Just this morning, I met with our what I call our teacher cabinet. So it was, and I have that at each level. So this is middle school teachers that I bring together, representatives from each school that I bring together. That we just have some honest conversations around how things are going. Where are they getting the right resources and supports that they need? What are the challenges they are facing? And to make sure that we can remove some of those barriers and we can make sure that they can have supports to do the important work. I have that at each level with our teachers. And then I've got a couple of structures that I set up for principals. Understanding, as a former elementary, middle, and high school principal, I understand the power of that role and how critical that leadership is at that level. So I do have structures. I've got a principal leadership team that I get together with every other week, that we just talk about how things are going, what do you need, how are you feeling about the support you're receiving. We talk about communication. Are you getting the right communication that you need? And so making sure from my seat that I can ensure our team is supporting this work, and then we're putting the right supports and structures in place at the right levels. So I'm sure there's a couple other structures that I missed, but those are just a couple that I've used to really be intentional about making sure that I'm staying closest to the work and making sure that we're providing the right amount of support at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's more than almost every district I've spoken to. I don't know of another superintendent that has that many different advisory groups. I mean, from teachers at each level, principals at each level, students. I get so pumped up when I hear that there's student advisory groups, because having that student voice fuel a lot of the work that's being done. I think that's the most important thing, because ultimately every single one of our jobs is to serve students, right? What are some examples of things that have come out of those student advisory groups?
I think with the student advisory, I do have one student advisory group that really focuses on, like I said, those key focus areas. But there's others as well. I mean, I think in just a couple of weeks, I'll be bringing together all the student leaders from across all 6 of our high schools, and that is all of our class officers, all our student government leaders. And so we'll be coming to talk about transition. We met in the fall and we talked about mental health, right? And so hearing from them directly in terms of giving them information, but then giving out that opportunity for feedback is really important, to say, hey, I didn't know we had psychologists and social workers in our schools. And I said, okay, well, that's really helpful. So we got to think about, how can I help you with that? How can you help that as student leaders in terms of leading that work forward? And then they actually had some ideas, some things that we are now doing second semester as a result of their feedback. Um, Another really exciting piece that we've dipped into is around shadowing a student. So first semester, I took the full day and shadowed a high school student all day. It's a
That's
really,
awesome.
and I've done it several times before, but I think it's really important to keep me reminded, keep ourselves reminded about the student experience and what our students experience in our schools each and every day. And so that's always a powerful experience for me. And so I've encouraged others to engage in that. And then we have debrief conversations around, how did that feel to you? Is that what you expected? Is that what we want for our kids? And what can that look like? The other thing that I'll mention is we have 2 student school board reps on our school board. And so it's a great opportunity to work alongside of them as they represent students across our county. And then also, as you know, they go out, one of their charges we've been working with is how do they get into our, because they're two high school kids, how do they get into our elementary and middle schools and our high schools to make sure they're in touch with the student perspective and the student feedback, and really to work with them. Right now they're planning some leadership workshops with our elementary and middle school kids, and so finding more ways that we can involve our kids. We have school board committees, advisory committees, and we have a student on every one of those, that we have a student slot to be a part of that. So we really value student voice here, and really trying to continue to build that up so our kids know that we really care about their experience and their feedback, and their voice really matters to us.
Well, the most important thing about all of this is you can create the time and space to listen. You can preach about student voice and all these things. It's another thing to follow through, right? It's another thing to actually take the feedback that you're getting from these conversations and actually doing something about it. It's another thing to say that you take student voice very seriously and then to actually have a student on every single advisory board. I mean, that's amazing. And the shadowing thing too. I've never heard a superintendent say that either, and I might get yelled at online for saying this, but I almost want to say that every single person across the entire district should shadow a student for 1 day every school year, even teachers. Um, because that just feels like such a great way to stay connected and stay grounded in like what are we actually meant to be doing here. Right. So that's really cool. How long have you been doing that?
I think I started it when I was a middle school principal. And in each spot I've been since then, I've shadowed a student just to understand the student's perspective. And really, it's to keep me grounded, right? And I always worried about coming out of the classroom, want to make sure I continue to have that perspective and stay closest to that work. And so I think about that a lot. And then now coming in the seat that I'm in now, making sure that I stay in touch with our principals and our teachers to keep that perspective. And so it's always just an eye-opening experience, and just a great reminder that for me to stay grounded in what's most important.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny for me on my side, when I first started my company, I obviously spent a lot of time in classrooms, right? We were doing discovery. I was trying to make sure we were solving a big enough problem, making sure solution was good and all these things. And I was worried that as the company grew, I wouldn't be able to spend as much time in classrooms. And what I've learned is that I actually spend more time in classrooms now than I did because it is hands down the most valuable use of my time. And so going from like the beginning when I just started, I want to stay grounded to now it's actually the biggest, most important part is super, super crucial. So listen, I want to transition topics here into initiatives that you guys have going on at the district. I've read a little bit about the specialty centers, but I want to learn a little bit more about those from your perspective.
Yeah, so this is really driven by our strategic plan. So, goal one of our strategic plan is that every student will achieve post secondary success. And so that means that every kid needs to have a path, and they need to have opportunities to learn about that path, to try it out. And we firmly believe that it's great if we can get students in a desired path and that's where they want to go. That's great. But it's probably equally important if a kid says, I thought I wanted to do this. And once I got into the field, I realized that's not for me.
Yep.
And so we think that's equally important there, as they learn about themselves as a learner and as a person. So we have worked to build out what we've called specialty centers. They are in each of our high schools. We actually have four of them now. The last two will are getting up and rolling here this fall. And they've really been based around student interest and community interest, but then also directly tied to local and regional job demand. And so we've really looked at a lot of data in terms of what is the job market now, and what does that look like into the future. And we continue to want to make sure that we are adaptable and agile, so that we can make the tweaks and changes that we need. So for example, we have our LEAPS Center, which is leadership, education, and public service. That's at one high school that focuses, that's got a criminal justice pathway, that's got a law pathway, it's got a teachers for tomorrow, kind of future educators pathway. Um, in a community leadership pathway. We've also got another, we call it the Champs Center, and that is at another high school, and that's focused on community health, mental health. And so really that's we have a medical assistant pathway there. We've got a nursing program there. We've got a number of different pathways there. Each center has about four or five pathways total that they can go into. Then we have our Epic Center, which is our construction trades and trades in the industry. So there is masonry, carpentry, electricity, HVAC. And so we have just now built out a new pathway there that's around data center operations, because we have a lot of data centers coming here in Virginia into Stafford. We've also seen job demand and fiber optic technicians. So we are building out that pathway there. So that's a couple in the Epic Center. Our fourth one just came online this year. That's business and information technology. So things around cybersecurity and coding and everything that goes there on the business side there too, and business information. And then our fifth and sixth ones that are coming online. Number five is going to be the Ascent Center. So that is aerospace, supply chain, energy, navigation technologies, and so drone technology there. In those pathways. And then we've got a new one coming up that's going to be audio and music production. So the live event management, digital content creation. Really, you think about your fine and performing arts there, all of everything that goes in there. So those are our six different specialty centers that we have been building out to give kids opportunities to think about. And we started really at a very young age as we think about in elementary school around career exploration and interests and those types of things to building in middle school. We match those with those opportunities that we give them on experiences to really dig in that a little bit further. And then as they immerse themselves in that through a specialty center or another special program in high school, so that we can track that along the way to see how those experiences are coming and allow them to shift and move along the way so that they can be successful when they leave us after their K-12 experience. And most recently, I'm excited about we've developed and worked to develop a alumni platform so we can not only see where they are with us K-12, how do we track them when they leave us to say, were they successful in that experience? Did they go into a different field? Was the experiences and education we gave them here in Stafford County, how did that help them to be successful post secondary?
That's so cool. I mean, I all those specialty centers, the opportunities for students, and you said 2 things that really struck a chord, and you can hear it in a previous episode or on our website, literally verbatim, you said it. The first one is understanding who a student is as a learner and a person. For me, I would love to share with you a framework that was actually developed outside of the context of education, but I had the pleasure of meeting with the professor who developed it, and we kinda talked about it in the context of education, so that was one. And then the other one too is you find just as much value in a student going to a center and deciding that they love it as you do a student going to a center or exploring a career and deciding that it's not for them. And that is one of the biggest things I've been focused on recently because it's just about knowing yourself, right? For me, I'm a huge guy on passion. Like, I'm a very passionate person myself. I've been passionate about what we're doing since I was like 15 years old. When I go speak at schools, career days, and whatever, I center everything around this idea of finding your passions. And the only way to do that is just to expose yourself to a bunch of different things. So, super in line with you there, but amazing all of the stuff that you guys have developed. I want to talk more about the tracking student interests and career and stuff like that. You said it a little bit, and I read a little bit about it before. You start tracking student interest in elementary school all the way through high school. And then I know right there at the end, you said tracking it beyond high school to see kind of how that plays out. Can you talk more about that framework? What does that look like for an elementary student, and how does that transform all the way through high school?
Yeah, and so we've tried to really help our it's really living with our counselors and our teachers to really understand our kids. And so, I'll take this back. It's really back to that relationship. So making sure that every kid has an adult in their school that they know and trust and that they can support them. And so, how do we build on those relationships to make sure that the kids are having some of those experiences and they feel comfortable talking to adults and sharing some of their interests so that we can help them match them up. And so, really at the elementary level, it is really that initial exploration. So we have lessons that happen in their counseling lessons, but then also we've developed more virtual experiences. So, for example, all of our fifth graders have a virtual career experience as we use the virtual headsets, that you see
Yeah, yeah,
around,
yeah.
and to make sure they can have some of those experiences to see to try some of that out. We actually build it out over a longer academic and career plan as we start to get to middle school. And so it does start to track out. Here are some of the things you're interested in. In sixth grade, we have what we call career GPS, where we bring all of our sixth graders actually come to our regional airport and we have a lot of different career fields. We have different colleges. We have different all the different pathways there, and students are clustered by the top three interests that they have, and so they're able to go to some of those career clusters. So there were 17 career clusters in Virginia. They're now 14, and so they're able to go to those career clusters that are most interest to them in a group and learn about that. Really in sixth grade at their career GPS and talk to folks in the field, get to know a little bit about what their day-to-day job looks like, ask them questions. And then we have all of our specialty centers are showcased there as well. So you can start to learn what are some of the things that you can do in middle school and high school if you want to consider to pursue that, or you want to go in another direction at the same time. And then, as we get to, especially in their eighth grade year, we have what we call discovery nights for them to work around to see the different program offerings. And then we go through an application process. But it's a lottery. So all of our systems are by a lottery. And so we're really proud of that, that it's about opportunity and access for all kids. If a kid struggled in their sixth grade year in math and really had a bad year, that doesn't disqualify them for being having access to a program that they might be really interested in. And so
Yeah.
all of our programs are by lottery by design. And so it does allow access and opportunity across our division and our district for our kids. And so they're able to look at those programs. And what I also really want to share is that aside from our specialty centers, we've got many other secondary programs that kids can go into aside from that. So we've got a robust cosmetology and barbering program, right? We've got associate's degree pathways where kids can get their associate's degree before they graduate from high school. And so many other secondary programs that kids. We've got a firefighting EMT program that they can go into, and so really trying to match that up, whether that's in a center, outside of a center, whether it's going to your comprehensive high school. We have incredible programs there as well, and so making sure that we have those pathways and opportunities for each and every one of our kids and families.
That's awesome. I feel like I didn't have any of this in high school, or maybe I just didn't know about it, but I don't know. That's really cool. I really admire all of the opportunities you guys have for like real world stuff too. That's the cool thing. And this is not like some, random like education class. This is like real world value stuff.
It is, and I'll say one of the things that's challenging that we do really well here is making sure we communicate with our families, and so we're
Yeah.
very fortunate to have an incredible communications department that's lean staff, but they do an incredible job in terms of making sure that we have 165,000 families in Stafford County, and how do we reach
Wow.
each of those families that speak over 110 different languages, right? So really thinking about how do we reach each and every kid and every family. They're incredibly intentional about it and strategic to make sure that we are having those opportunities to connect with those families. We having that two-way dialogue and setting up those platforms to intentionally communicate with our families so that every family knows about the opportunities, not just those that are tuned in or speak a certain language or have the time. Because frankly, we are a commuter community. Being 45 minutes outside of DC and an hour north of Richmond, a lot of our parents travel to work, and so thinking about how do we reach families that don't have a lot of time. And so we're very fortunate to have an incredible communications department that does that.
Well, shout out to the lean and mean communications team. How about them? Listen, I want to throw a couple frameworks at you if you're cool with it. One is the kind of holistic student view. The other is a framework on understanding student interests. So the first is the holistic one. So it's called the four quadrant model, developed by a Danish psychology professor named Jan Tonis Spang, and it was built in the context of Gestalt therapy, so in a very clinical setting. And I had the pleasure of flying to Denmark, sitting down with him, and we just nerded out about this framework for like 8 hours. It was great. And there's four quadrants. So the top left is going to be the singular internal. The top right is going to be the singular external. Bottom left is going to be plural internal. And bottom right is going to be plural external.
Okay.
So plural, or I'm sorry, singular internal is going to be like your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, right? The things that are singular to you and inside. No one else can observe unless you share them. Singular external is going to be your relationships, your behaviors, your actions, the words you speak, right? Things that are still singular to you, but observable by those around you. Plural internal is going to be like your family values, your morals, maybe your religion, things that are shared amongst an inner group, but still maybe specific to like your chosen group of people. And then plural external is going to be like your government, your natural environment, your work system, if you work at a big company, things that are just generally shared amongst the population around you. And the theory behind this framework is that before you can analyze a client's phenomena, even if that phenomena lies exclusively in one of those quadrants, you must first understand all four of those quadrants holistically. And so translating that into education, when we say we want to understand who a student is as a learner and a person, we need to know way more about them rather than just their reading level and their test score and their standard proficiency. We need to know like who is the student as a person? What's their home life, right? What kind of breakfast are they being fed in the morning? Are they sleeping well? How are they getting to school every day? All of these things that play a huge role on who they are as a student every single day in the classroom. So that's framework one. Framework two is called the four-phase model of interest development. And this one I think you'll find very interesting if you haven't already heard of it. Have you heard of it? Okay. So this is these researchers basically built this framework for how an interest goes from a what they call a brand new stimulus into a well-developed interest, or what we would colloquially think of as a hobby or a passion. And so phase one is basically like student goes from their head down in the classroom to they look up. Teacher says something that they find interesting, their interest is piqued, right? This can be novelty, surprise, humor, any little type of thing there that gets them to pay attention, right? Phase 2 is they are looking at the teacher, and then maybe they're interested enough to actually raise their hand and ask a question. Maybe they start chit-chatting to their friend next to them about this topic, right? The key here, though, is that this stimulus does not persist in the environment without the teacher bringing it up. So the student's not thinking about it on their own. They're only thinking about it if the teacher is talking about it, bringing it up to them. Phase 3 is where the big jump is made. The third party, in this case, the teacher, is no longer necessary to persist this stimulus. So the student is now leaving class talking about it, thinking about it, all these things. And then phase 4 is where it becomes, again, like a passion or a hobby, something that is a long-term, self-determined, self-directed pursuit of information. And so using that framework, we can understand which phase of interest a student is in, and then track the development and also recommend new interests based on knowing that process. So those are just two frameworks that I thought were paired well with some of the stuff you were talking about. But you mentioned the diversity of your community, over 100 languages spoken. I know that you've spearheaded some initiatives on some dual language immersion programs. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think we have worked on what our high schools look like in terms of those specialty centers, but then we also need to think about what our elementary and middle schools look like. And so that's work we're engaged in right now as we are thinking about our upcoming program of studies. But we do have a dual language immersion program at one of our elementary schools, and there's those students are going into fourth grade next year. So it's been going on for a couple of years now as we've added more and more to that. And so we're actually doing a program evaluation of that right now just to see how it's working and looking at some other model programs in terms of, are we implementing it with fidelity? Are we seeing the results? How, what does the student and family experience look like? Some of those things. So yes, we do have it in one of our elementary schools, but we're always looking to see how we can get better.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm a product of a Spanish dual immersion program. So I was supposed to be K through 12. I left for sports, but K through 8, I was Spanish dual immersion, and absolute best thing my parents ever did for me. So super, yeah, I really support all that work.
Yeah.
Talking about student-centered leadership, right? You talked about it a little bit in the beginning with student presence and the advisory boards and their voice and the board that you have with just students. Is there more work that you guys are doing there with student-centered leadership?
I think one of some of the work that we are doing now is really thinking about how do we further support our student leaders. I know we've talked about, so we have student leadership groups in each of our high schools. How do we bring them together? How does it like more of a county-wide leadership council and bring those folks together? And how do you support them as leaders to come together and learn from each other and lead our county forward, but then also go back out into their schools and provide that leadership? Um, our school board reps I mentioned are starting the leadership workshop, and so we're going to see how that goes, and hopefully that can grow and something that we can share across our high schools to as they work with their elementary and middle schools, looking at more of some of those models. And then I would say we're working with some of our athletics and our coaches around what does student athlete leadership look like. I know we also, oh, you're going to be a captain, right? Well, what does that mean? Right? What does
Yeah.
that mean? What are you responsible for? So thinking about that from a student leadership side, how do we prepare our students to lead in those athletics and activity settings? Um, and how do we make sure they have the skills to do that to be successful?
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so key too, right? Like a student is named a team captain on the baseball team, football team, but there's no education behind that. It's kind of like, hey, you're one of the best players, or you're leader, or popular, or whatever. But what does that really mean? So that's really valuable
So
too.
we're talking about how do we bring those kids together, right? And then we build they're a part of a cohort of student athlete leaders that come together and learn about what does it mean, right? And
Yeah.
so we build their capacity throughout the year so that they can kind of take it back to their teams and maybe do some of the work, and then just continue to build their capacity as leaders.
And our conversation is really focused on the value of student voice in the operations and innovation of a district, but we haven't really touched on the value for a student, right? The experience that they have, right? You mentioned those 2 high school students that are putting together leadership workshops, right? What high school student is putting together a leadership workshop? This experience for them must be so awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, they're incredible. They went through an application and interview process to be selected as our school board student reps, and I think it speaks to our school board and them valuing that student voice. But I mean, they actually put out applications to create a team of themselves. They had 85 applications, I think, for students that wanted to be a part of their team. And so
Wow.
they've got a media team, and they've got all communication teams. And so that they've selected kids as they, because they realize they can't do it all themselves. And the more they can involve others, they can impact so many others. So it's been incredible to see the work they've done thus far and the plans they have moving forward.
That's awesome. And when did that start?
So this we have student school board reps. We go on. They come on 1 year cycles. So we just these two reps just started in January,
Cool.
and so we've been doing student school board reps for about 3 or 4 years now.
Awesome. That's super cool. Want to shift conversation one more time here and address kind of the elephant in education, which is the growth of technology, the growth of AI. What do conversations look like for you guys in your district with regards to AI implementation, AI literacy, et cetera?
So we've been doing a lot of work around, again, I talked about building capacity before, but really it is that building capacity of our leaders, our teachers, and our educators to understand what it is, what are the risks, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks that we need to consider. And so we can have those conversations at the same time, giving them space and opportunity to play and to learn and to fail, right? In that whole process. And so um, we've done work at the senior leadership level here at the district level. We've done work with our principals and assistant principals and some of our technology, we call them instructional technology teachers. They're going through a second cohort now to work through some of that. We have modules for teachers that they've gone through, whether you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, that they would work through to understand more about it. And now we're working to build in more components around digital citizenship and AI literacy. Specifically, we're looking to embed it in ninth grade English next year, something that all students get. And we would build in modules. We partner with a local university here that has a center on AI to build out those modules to understand, because we hear a lot about prompting and understand how to prompt, but it's also to know where's your data going, right? And to
Yeah.
know we use Google, so we have a walled garden with Gemini in terms of that. And so how to use Gemini versus how might you explore some other AI tools and what that might look like. So really understanding more of the back end of it, so you know where your data is going and how that's being used. And then we get into conversations around when should you cite AI? Do you need to cite AI? And
Yeah.
to have the conversation, about that. And if you use it in certain places, should you? And then we start to talk about, well, do you cite when you use Google? And do you cite when you use a calculator? And so we get into those really good conversations that we can
Yeah.
have that are, just they open up new doors for us just to think more about this, to understand that this is not something that's going away, just like probably many other things. Who's going to teach our kids about AI? It's going to be the educators and it's going to be our schools. And so,
No
how do
kid.
we do that in a right way to make sure that we are preparing our kids, again, to be successful when they leave us? Because no longer is it going to be about is AI going to replace jobs? I don't think it's going to be about the individual that knows how to leverage AI and their individual that does not. That's going to be some of the key differences. And so, how do we set our kids up for success and our teachers and educators to prepare those kids to be successful?
100%. I'm gonna steal that, by the way. Do you cite when you use a calculator? That's pretty funny. I've not heard that question, but I promise you I will be using that. That's a
Okay,
good one.
feel free.
Well, listen, Daniel, this has been great. I want to wrap up one final question here. What is kind of your big long-term vision for education in terms of pedagogy, in terms of structure, in terms of outcomes? What is your perfect world of education look like?
My perfect world for education is that first we talked about a little bit earlier, that we know each student well, that we know what each kid's passion is, what their interests, what their likes, what their dislikes, what's relevant for them, and so and how do we customize education for them to have a personalized plan for each one of those kids so that they can understand what they're learning, why they're going to learn it, and how it's going to help them to be successful. And so to make sure that each lesson is relevant, it's no longer that you have to learn it because you have to perform some way on a test that years ago nobody cares about, and even probably the next day nobody cares about. Like let's make sure we personalize education to meet the needs of each kid based on their interests, their passions, and so they can be successful. And that we help them to understand their path, but also understand. We talked about sports earlier. Anything that you want to achieve is possible, and how do we help you to set that path? And we coach you along the way to help you to make sure you're reaching those goals, understanding you're going to fail along the way, and failure is a part of that learning process. So how do we make sure that that happens and that we are right beside them, helping to pick them up to make sure that they take that next step, and so they can achieve whatever they aspire to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right there with you, man. We're fighting the good fight. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks a lot. Thanks again. Very nice meeting you.
Thanks for listening. Got an idea, a story, or a question about what we discussed today? We'd love to hear from you. To learn more about Unique Learn, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, and visit uniquelearn.co.